Clara Whitmore pressed her 4-year-old daughter against her chest and felt the child's breathing grow shallow in the freezing wind. 5 girls. 5 daughters depending on her to find shelter before nightfall. And the stagecoach driver had just pointed toward empty wilderness and told her to walk. 3 miles, he'd said. Her dead uncle's ranch lay 3 miles through snow that reached her knees. Baby Ruth coughed a wet, terrible sound. Clara started walking. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. Subscribe now and stay until the end, because what happens in that Colorado Valley will change everything you believe about survival, motherhood, and second chances.
Shipwreck.
Clara's boots broke through the snow crust with every step, her body sinking to mid-thigh before finding solid ground. Ruth whimpered against her shoulder, the child's small hands like ice, even through Clara's worn coat. "Mama?" Abigail's voice came from behind, steady, despite everything. "Lottie can't feel her feet anymore." Clara stopped, turned. 4 daughters stretched behind her in a ragged line, the older ones helping the younger, all of them shaking so hard their teeth chattered in rhythm. Josie held Lottie on her back, the 14-year-old's face red with effort and fury. Louisa walked beside them, her practical eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of buildings. "How much farther?" Josie demanded. "The driver said 3 miles. "The driver left us to die." Clara couldn't argue with that. The man had taken one look at her 5 daughters, calculated the weight against his schedule, and decided they weren't worth the extra mile to the actual ranch house. "I don't take wagons off the main road," he'd said. "Not for nobody. I have children, small children. Should have thought of that before you came west in November." Ruth coughed again, that wet rattle that had started somewhere in Kansas and grown worse with every mile. Clara shifted the child higher, felt the fever heat radiating through thin clothes. "We keep moving," Clara said. "We stop, we freeze." "Mama." Lottie's voice was small, scared. "I'm sorry my feet don't work right." "Your feet are fine, baby. Josie's going to carry you a little longer." "I can walk. I can try." "I know you can, but let your sister help. That's what sisters do." They pushed forward. The sun hung low and red over mountains. Clara didn't know the names of painting the snow in shades of blood and gold. Beautiful, she thought distantly. This place might be beautiful if it wasn't trying to kill her children. Abigail moved up beside her, matching her pace despite the difficulty. 17 years old, already more woman than girl, already carrying weight no child should bear. "Mama Ruth's breathing is worse." "I know. She needs warmth, medicine, a doctor." "I know. What are we going to do?" Clara looked at her eldest daughter, saw the fear beneath the composure, and told her the only truth she had. "We're going to walk until we find that ranch. Then we're going to build a fire. Then we're going to survive the night. Everything after that we figure out tomorrow. And if we don't find it before dark, then we dig into the snow and use our bodies to keep the little ones warm." Abigail absorbed this without flinching. She'd learned young not to flinch. They all had, living with a father whose moods shifted like weather and whose fists found targets too easily. "I won't let them die, Mama." "Neither will I." They walked. The cold deepened. Ruth stopped coughing, which terrified Clara more than the coughing had. Lottie went silent on Josie's back, and Josie's steps began to stagger. "Put her down," Clara said. "I can carry her." "You're exhausted. Louisa, take over." "I'm 11, Mama. She's 8. "And you're stronger than you know. Take your sister." The transfer happened quickly. Lottie's small body passing from one sister to another, all of them too cold and tired for gentleness. Josie stumbled when the weight released, and Abigail caught her arm. "Easy." "I'm fine." "You're about to fall over." "I said I'm fine." The sisters glared at each other, anger rising because anger was warmer than fear. "Stop." Clara's voice cut through their conflict. "Look." A head barely visible through the gathering dusk, smoke rose from a chimney. Not her uncle's ranch, The direction was wrong. But smoke meant fire. Fire meant warmth. Warmth meant Ruth might live through the night. "Move," Clara said. "Fast as you can." They half ran, half stumbled through snow that seemed determined to drag them down. The building materialized slowly, a cabin solid, and weathered light glowing behind frosted windows. Clara reached the door first and pounded with a fist she could barely feel. "Hello, please. I have children." "Nothing." She pounded again. "Please, my baby is sick." The door swung open. The man who stood there was tall and broad, his face half hidden by shadow and beard, his eyes the cold gray of winter sky. He looked at Clara, looked past her at 5 shivering girls. His expression didn't change. "You the Whitmore woman?" Clara's heart lurched. "You know who I am. Whole Valley knows, city widow coming to claim old Ezra's place." He stepped back from the doorway. "Get inside, all of you, now." Clara didn't hesitate. She pushed past him into warmth that hit her frozen skin like physical pain. The girls followed, stumbling over each other, Louisa nearly dropping Lottie in her exhaustion. The cabin was sparse but clean. A fire blazed in a stone hearth. A pot hung over the flames, steam rising, the smell of food making Clara's stomach clench with sudden desperate hunger. "Sit them by the fire," the man said. "Not too close. Warming up too fast can kill you, same as the cold." Clara lowered Ruth onto a blanket near the hearth, her hands shaking too badly for precision. The child's lips were blue. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was barely visible. "Ruth, baby, wake up." Nothing. "Ruth." The man knelt beside her, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he checked the child's pulse, her breathing the color of her nail beds. How long has she been like this? She was coughing until maybe 20 minutes ago. Then she just stopped. Stopped coughing is bad. Stopped shivering is worse. He stood, moved to a cabinet, returned with a bottle and clean cloth. "Whiskey. Don't look at me like that, it's not for drinking. We need to warm her blood." He soaked the cloth, began rubbing it over Ruth's small hands and feet with brisk, methodical movements. Clara watched helpless as her 4-year-old daughter lay motionless between them. "She's going to die." Lottie's voice came thin and terrified from across the room. "Baby Ruth's going to die like Papa did." "Nobody's dying." The man didn't look up from his work. "Not tonight. Not if I can help it." "Who are you?" Clara heard herself ask. "Silas McAllister. Ranch next to your uncle's place, 3 miles that way." He jerked his head eastward without pausing his ministrations. "You were walking the wrong direction." "The driver." "The driver's a drunk and a fool. Points east when he means west half the time." Silas's jaw tightened. Should have known better than to trust him with passengers in November. Ruth stirred, coughed. A weak, thin sound, but a sound. "There you are." Silas's voice softened. "Come on, little one. Come back." The child's eyes fluttered open. She saw a stranger's face above her and started to cry soft, exhausted sobs that made Clara want to weep with relief. "She's going to be all right," Clara asked. "For tonight. Tomorrow we get a doctor to look at that cough. Sounds like her lungs might be filling." Silas stood, wiped his hands on his pants. "You other girls, what are your names?" Abigail stepped forward first. "Abigail Whitmore, sir. This is Josephine Louisa Charlotte, and you've met Ruth." "5 daughters." "Yes, sir. No sons." Clara felt her spine stiffen at his tone. "No. No sons. Is that a problem?" Silas looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable. "Not for me. Might be for you trying to run a ranch out here." He moved to the pot over the fire, began ladling stew into bowls. "Your Uncle Ezra had 3 sons. Lost all of them to fever one winter. That's why his place went to you, nobody else left." "I didn't know he had children." There's a lot you don't know, Mrs. Whitmore. That's going to be a problem. Josie bristled from her spot near the fire. You don't have to be rude about it. Josie. Clara's voice carried warning. He's acting like we're stupid. We're not stupid. We just didn't have a choice. Silas handed Josie a bowl. Eat. I don't want. Eat. Arguing takes energy. You don't have any to spare. Josie glared at him, but took the bowl. Her first bite was defiant. Her second was ravenous. She finished in minutes and looked ashamed of her hunger. More on the stove, Silas said. All of you eat until you're full. Going to be a long night. They ate in silence. 5 girls and 1 woman consuming enough food for twice their number. Clara hadn't realized how hungry she'd been, how long since any of them had eaten properly. The stagecoach journey had offered little beyond hardtack and weak coffee. When the bowls were empty, Silas collected them without comment and set them aside for washing. Sleep arrangements, he said. I've got 2 beds. You take one with the little ones. Older girls take the other. I'll sleep by the fire. We can't take your beds, Mr. McAllister. You can and you will. I've slept by plenty of fires. But, Mrs. Whitmore, his voice cut through her protest like a blade. Your children nearly died tonight because some fool driver pointed you the wrong direction. I'm not going to let them freeze because their mother's too proud to accept a warm bed. Take it. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Exhaustion relief, the simple shock of someone offering help without conditions. Thank you. Silas nodded, the gesture sharp and brief. Thank me when your baby survives the night. Morning comes, we need to talk about your situation. What about it? About whether you've got any chance of surviving what's coming, or whether I should put you and your girls back on a stage headed east before this valley buries you. The words were harsh. The delivery was matter-of-fact. Clara heard them both as kindness. The kindness of honesty from someone who knew what she didn't. I'm not going back east, Mr. McAllister. You sure about that? There's nothing to go back to. My husband's dead. His debts consumed everything we owned. I have $5, 5 daughters, and a piece of land I've never seen that supposedly belongs to me now. Clara lifted her chin despite exhaustion. I'm not going back. There's nowhere to go. Silas studied her in the firelight, something shifting behind those gray eyes. All right then, he said finally. Morning comes, we'll see what you're made of. Clara woke to pale light and the sound of Ruth coughing. She was out of the bed before full consciousness returned, crossing to the smaller bed where Ruth lay between Louisa and Lottie, her small body shaking with each rattling breath. Easy, baby. I'm here. Mama. Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. I feel bad. I know. We're going to get you help. The door opened, and Silas entered, stomping snow from his boots, his arms full of firewood. He took in the scene with a single glance. Worse? The same, maybe. I don't know. Town's 12 miles. Doc Williams makes calls, but not in weather like this. Silas stacked wood by the hearth with practiced efficiency. I've got some medicine in the barn. Horse liniment mostly, but there's a few things might help human lungs. Horse liniment. Works better than you'd think. He straightened brushed bark from his sleeves. Your older girl Abigail, she's already up. Found her trying to figure out my cook stove. She's capable. I noticed. The angry one, Josie, she went back to sleep after telling me my cabin smells like horse. Despite everything, Clara felt her lips twitch toward a smile. She's not wrong. No, she's not. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Silas's face. I'll get that medicine. You keep the baby warm, get some food in her if she'll take it. He left. Clara heard him crossing the yard, his boots crunching through snow, then the distant sound of a barn door opening. Abigail appeared from the kitchen area, a pan of something that smelled like eggs in her hands. I found supplies, she said. He's got more food than I expected. He lives alone out here. Makes sense he'd stock up. Mama. Abigail's voice dropped. What are we going to do? What we always do. Survive today. Plan for tomorrow. Ruth needs a doctor. I know. And Uncle Ezra's ranch, we don't even know what state it's in. What if it's fallen apart? What if there's nothing there? Then we figure something out. How? We have $5. $5, Mama. That's not enough to feed 6 people for a week, let alone... Abigail. Clara crossed to her daughter, took the pan from her shaking hands, set it aside. Listen to me. I know you're scared. I know this feels impossible. But I need you to help me keep your sisters calm while I figure out our next step. Can you do that? Abigail's eyes filled with tears she was too proud to shed. I'm trying. I know you are. And I'm sorry, this is the life I've given you. You deserve better. Mama, don't. You deserve a father who didn't drink away every penny we had. You deserve a home that didn't get sold to pay his debts. I deserve a mother who fights for us. Abigail gripped Clara's hands. And that's what I have. That's what matters. The door banged open. Silas entered with a small wooden box, his expression grim. Medicine, he said, setting it on the table. But we've got a bigger problem. What? Ryder coming up the valley, saw him from the barn. Silas moved to the window, peered through frost. Jedediah Crane owns the biggest spread in the county, also owns the bank, the general store, and about half the town's debt. Why is he coming here? Because he heard about you, Mrs. Whitmore. Same as everyone else. Silas turned from the window, his face hard. Your uncle owed him money, a lot of money. Crane's been waiting for someone to show up and claim that land so he could collect. Clara felt ice spread through her chest. How much money? Don't know exactly. Hundreds at least, maybe more. I don't have hundreds. I have $5. Then you have a problem. Silas moved toward the door. Stay inside. Keep the girls quiet. Let me talk to him first. Mr. McAllister, stay. Inside. He left. Clara watched through the window as a horse and rider materialized from the snowy distance, a dark figure against all that white moving, with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. Mama! Louisa's voice came from the bedroom doorway. Who's coming? I don't know yet. Wake your sisters, but tell them to stay quiet. And Louisa, yes. Keep them away from the windows. Clara watched Silas walk out to meet the rider, 2 men facing each other in snow that caught the morning light like scattered diamonds. She couldn't hear their words, but she could read their bodies. Silas standing solid and impassive, the other man gesturing sharply, his horse shifting beneath him with barely contained energy. Then the rider looked toward the cabin. Even from this distance, Clara felt the weight of his gaze, the calculation in it. He said something to Silas. Silas shook his head. The rider laughed. She heard that a sharp bark that carried across the cold air and turned his horse toward the cabin door. Silas stepped into his path. Clara couldn't hear what was said, but she saw the rider's expression darken, saw his hand move toward his hip where a gun hung, saw Silas go utterly still in a way that suggested danger despite his motionlessness. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the rider wheeled his horse and rode back the way he'd come, leaving a trail of churned snow behind him. Silas stood watching until horse and rider disappeared over a ridge. Only then did he turn and walk back to the cabin. He entered without ceremony, brushing snow from his coat. Jedediah Crane, he said, wanted to introduce himself to the new neighbor. What did he want? Same thing he always wants. Your land, your water rights, whatever he can get. Silas hung his coat by the door. I told him you weren't receiving visitors. What did he say? Said he'd be back. Said he had documents showing your uncle owed him $800. Said if you can't pay, he'll take the land as settlement. $800. Clara felt the number like a physical blow. She'd never had $800 in her entire life. Is it true? Did my uncle owe him that much? Might be. Ezra had hard years toward the end. Lost his sons, lost his will to fight. A man like Crane, he preys on that kind of weakness. So I inherit debt along with land I've never seen. Appears so. Clara sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. 5 daughters, $5, 800 in debt, a sick baby, a hostile creditor, and a wilderness she didn't know how to survive. Mrs. Whitmore. She looked up. Silas stood over her, his expression difficult to read but not unkind. Your uncle's ranch is standing. I checked it last month, made sure the roof was sound, the animals hadn't gotten in. It needs work, a lot of work, but it's shelter. You and your girls can live there. With what money? What food? I've got supplies I can spare to get you through the first month. After that... He paused, seemed to be wrestling with something. After that, we figure out your options. Why would you help us? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Your uncle was a decent man, he said finally. Decent neighbor. Helped me through a bad winter once when I was grieving and too proud to ask. I owed him. Can't pay him back now, but I can help his kin. That's the only reason. Something flickered in his gray eyes, something old and painful and quickly hidden. That's enough reason, Mrs. Whitmore. Don't look for more than that. He turned away, began preparing something at the stove, his movements economical and sure. Clara watched him and felt beneath the terror and exhaustion and overwhelming weight of her circumstances the smallest flicker of something she barely recognized. Hope. Fragile, foolish hope, but hope nonetheless. They made the journey to her uncle's ranch that afternoon, traveling in Silas's wagon because Clara's children were too weak to walk, and the distance too far for safety. The ranch emerged from the snow like a ghost ship from fog, a house, a barn, outbuildings half buried in white, all of it still and silent and waiting. Home. Clara said the word, feeling strange on her tongue. Such as it is. Silas guided the horses to a stop before the main house. Needs work, a lot of work. I can see that. Question is whether you can do it. Clara looked at the ranch, at the years of labor it represented, at the life that might be possible here if she could somehow survive long enough to build it. Then she looked at her daughters, at Ruth, still feverish in Abigail's arms, at Josie's angry defiance, at Louisa's practical assessment, at Lottie's fearful hope. 5 girls. 5 reasons to fight. I can do it, Clara said. Whatever it takes. Silas studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. We'll see, he said. We'll see. The first week in her uncle's house taught Clara what survival really meant. She woke before dawn each morning, her body aching from sleeping on a mattress that mice had claimed long before she arrived. The cold crept through gaps in the walls, through windows that rattled with every gust, through a floor that seemed to radiate ice from the frozen ground beneath. Ruth's cough grew worse before it grew better. Clara spent 3 nights sitting upright, holding her youngest daughter against her chest, listening to each labored breath and praying it wouldn't be the last. Silas appeared on the second day with medicine he'd ridden 12 miles to fetch. He didn't explain how he'd managed to convince the doctor to part with it, didn't mention the cost. Simply handed Clara a brown bottle and said, 3 drops in warm water 4 times a day. Should help her lungs clear. I can't pay you for this. Didn't ask you to. Mr. McAllister. Give it to your girl before her fever gets worse. He turned toward the door, then paused. I'll be back tomorrow. Need to show you how to work the pump before it freezes solid. He left before Clara could thank him properly. The pump lesson came the next morning. Silas demonstrating with patient efficiency how to prime the mechanism, how to break ice that formed overnight, how to keep water flowing through pipes that wanted nothing more than to freeze. You'll need to do this every morning, he said. Before sunrise if you can manage it. Once the ice sets hard, you'll be melting snow for water, and that takes time you don't have. Clara's arms burned as she worked the pump handle, her muscles weak from years of city life, where water came from taps and heat came from radiators. But she pumped until water flowed, until her shoulders screamed, until she could feel the beginnings of calluses forming on her palms. "Better," Silas said when she finished. "You'll get faster." "I feel like I'm going to collapse." "You won't. Body's stronger than you think. Just needs time to remember." Josie appeared in the doorway, her face set in the angry expression that had become her constant companion since their father's death. "Mama Ruth's asking for you." "Is she worse?" "She wants breakfast, says she's hungry." Clara felt relief wash through her like warm water. Hungry was good. Hungry meant healing. "I'll be right there." Silas touched his hat. "I'll check the barn. See what equipment your uncle left that might still be useful." He walked away before Clara could respond, his boots leaving deep prints in snow that had fallen fresh overnight. "He's strange," Josie said, watching him go. "He's helping us." "Why?" "Because he was your uncle's neighbor, because he's a decent man." "Papa was decent too at first." Clara felt the words like a slap. She turned to face her daughter, fully saw the fear beneath the anger, the wounds that hadn't healed and might never heal completely. "Josie, Mr. McAllister is not your father. All men are the same eventually." "No, they're not." Clara gripped her daughter's shoulders. "I know your father hurt us. I know you're scared. But closing yourself off to everyone who might help us isn't protection, it's prison. We can't survive here alone. I don't trust him." "You don't have to. I'm asking you to give him a chance to prove himself, same as we're asking this valley to give us a chance." Josie's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue further. It was as close to agreement as Clara was likely to get. They went inside together, and Clara found Ruth sitting up in bed for the first time since their arrival. Her fever-bright eyes focused on the bowl of porridge Abigail was preparing. "Mama." Ruth's voice was still weak, but there was life in it. "I'm hungry." "I know, baby. Abby's making you breakfast." "Can I have extra? My tummy feels empty all the way down." Clara laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd laughed? "You can have as much as you want." Abigail brought the porridge, and Clara watched her youngest daughter eat with the desperate focus of the truly starving. The medicine was working. Ruth was going to survive. One crisis managed, 1,000 more waiting. Silas returned from the barn an hour later, his expression thoughtful. "Your uncle left more than I expected. Plows rusted but salvageable. Harness needs mending. Found some tools that'll be useful come spring." "Spring feels very far away." 3 months, give or take. Question is whether you can last that long. "What do we need to survive until then?" Silas settled into a chair across from her, his large frame making the furniture look fragile. "Food. You've got what I brought, maybe 2 weeks' worth if you're careful. After that, you need to buy more or find other sources." "With what money?" "That's the problem." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Your uncle ran cattle. Most of them scattered after he died, but some might still be on your land sheltering in the canyons where the wind doesn't reach. If we can find them, get them through winter, you'd have something to sell come spring." "How many cattle?" "Can't say for certain. Maybe 20 head. Maybe more, maybe less. Winter's hard on range cattle. Some won't survive no matter what we do. And if we can't find them, if they're all dead or gone, then you've got land but nothing to work it with. Crane will offer to buy. He'll offer less than it's worth, but it might be enough to get you and your girls somewhere safer." Clara felt her spine stiffen. "I'm not selling." "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm not selling. This is the only thing I have to give my daughters, the only future I can offer them. I won't hand it over to a man who tried to cheat my uncle when he was alive." Something shifted in Silas's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of a stubbornness that matched his own. "All right then. If you're staying, we need to find those cattle. And I need to teach you how to keep them alive. Teach me? It's not easy work. I don't need easy. I need possible. Silas studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable. Tomorrow, he said finally. Dress warm. We ride at first light. Clara had never ridden a horse in her life. She'd seen them on Philadelphia streets pulling carriages and wagons, their massive bodies a common sight, but never something she'd considered mounting. The mare Silas led from his barn the next morning looked enormous. This is Sadie, he said. Steadiest horse I own. She'll take care of you if you don't startle her. I don't know how to... You'll learn. He positioned her beside the horse, showed her where to put her foot, how to grip the saddle. Pull yourself up, swing your leg over. Don't think about it, just do it. Clara tried. Failed. Tried again. On the third attempt, she managed to haul herself into the saddle, her legs screaming protest, her heart pounding with the unfamiliar height. I'm up. You're up. Now stay up. They rode out from Silas's ranch toward the mountains, moving slow through snow that reached the horse's knees in places. Clara gripped the reins too tight, sat too stiff, made every mistake a new rider could make. Silas corrected her without impatience. Relax your legs. You're squeezing her like you're afraid she'll disappear. Loosen your grip on the reins, she knows where she's going. Move with her, not against her. You fight the horse, you'll both be miserable. By noon, Clara's thighs burned and her back ached, but she could stay mounted without constant terror. Progress such as it was. They found the first cattle in a canyon sheltered from the worst of the wind. 6 head thin, but alive, huddled together for warmth. They wore Clara's uncle's brand, a Lazy E, that marked them as hers. There's your start, Silas said. 6 is better than none. How do we get them back to the ranch? We don't. Not yet. They're sheltering here for a reason. We move them, now expose them to open wind. We might lose them before we make it home. Better to check on them regular, make sure they're finding forage, wait for a break in the weather to drive them somewhere more secure. Check on them how often? Every few days at least, you or me, doesn't matter who. But someone needs to see they're still alive and not drifted somewhere dangerous. Clara looked at the cattle, at the landscape she was only beginning to understand, at the man beside her, who was offering knowledge she desperately needed. Will you teach me how to check on them? How to read the signs that something's wrong? That's what I've been doing. I mean, really teach me. Not just show me once and hope I remember. I need to understand this land, these animals, what it takes to keep them alive. I need you to treat me like someone capable of learning, not someone you're humoring until she fails. Silas was quiet for a long time, his eyes on the distant peaks. Your uncle asked me something similar once, he said finally. When he first came out here, city man like you didn't know a steer from a heifer. Asked me to teach him proper, not just point him toward books and leave him to figure it out. What did you say? Said no. I had my own operation to run, didn't have time to nursemaid someone else's learning. And now I'm older. Maybe wiser. He turned to face her fully. I'll teach you. Not because you asked pretty, but because you're still here. Because you didn't take your girls and run when you saw what you were facing. That counts for something. What do you want in return? Nothing you can give me. Call it paying back what I owed your uncle. That's the second time you've mentioned owing him. What happened? Silas's face closed like a door slamming shut. That's not a story I tell. Fair enough. Clara didn't push. She understood about stories that couldn't be told, wounds that couldn't be shared. When do we start? Already started. Keep your eyes open and your mouth ready to ask questions. Everything I do out here, there's a reason. Your job is to learn the reasons until they become as natural as breathing. They rode back to the ranch as the sun began its descent, the cold deepening with every mile. Clara's body screamed for rest, but her mind was racing with everything she'd seen and heard, cataloging information she didn't fully understand, but was determined to remember. The girls were waiting when they returned. Abigail had dinner prepared, a simple stew, stretched to feed 6, from ingredients that wouldn't stretch much further. Josie watched Silas with wary eyes tracking his movements, like a prey animal watching a predator. "You're back," Louisa said. "We were worried when it got dark." "I'm fine. Mr. McAllister was teaching me about the cattle." "Did you find any?" "6 head. It's a start." "6." Josie's voice dripped with scorn. "That's not a start, that's a joke. How is 6 cattle supposed to save us?" "Josie." Clara's warning tone. "No, Mama. I'm tired of pretending this is going to work. We're in the middle of nowhere. It's freezing cold. Ruth nearly died, and all we've got is 6 cows and a stranger who—" "That's enough." "It's not enough. Nothing is enough. We should have stayed in Philadelphia, should have found some other way, should have—" "Done what?" Clara's voice rose to match her daughter's. "Gone to the poorhouse. Begged in the streets. Your father left us nothing but debt and shame, Josie. Philadelphia had nothing for us except people who were happy to see us suffer. At least it was warm. Warm and starving is still starving." The room went silent. Clara stood trembling. Her hands clenched at her sides, tears she refused to shed burning in her eyes. Silas cleared his throat quietly. "I'll take my leave. Early morning tomorrow, Mrs. Whitmore. We've got more ground to cover." He left without waiting for response, the door closing softly behind him. Josie stared at her mother, defiance cracking to show the terror beneath. "I'm scared, Mama." "I know, baby. I'm scared too." "Then why won't you admit it?" "Because admitting it doesn't change anything. Being scared doesn't find cattle or fix barns or put food on the table. It just takes energy we can't afford to waste." Clara crossed to her daughter, took her hands despite resistance. "I'm not asking you to pretend everything's fine. I'm asking you to fight beside me instead of against me." "How can I fight when I don't even know what we're fighting for? We're fighting for us, for this family, for some kind of future that doesn't involve depending on anyone else's charity or mercy." Clara squeezed her daughter's hands. "I know you're angry. I know you're scared. But I need you, Josie. I can't do this without you." The defiance crumbled. Josie fell against her mother, 14 years old, and carrying burdens no child should bear, and cried until she had nothing left. Clara held her through it, making promises she wasn't sure she could keep, offering comfort she wasn't sure she believed. But they were together. They were alive, and tomorrow they would keep fighting. 3 weeks passed in a blur of exhaustion and slow progress. Clara rode out with Silas nearly every day, learning the land inch by frozen inch, discovering skills her city upbringing had never prepared her for. She found 4 more cattle in a different canyon, bringing her total to 10. Not enough to build a future on, but enough to hope. Her hands calloused, then blistered, then calloused again. Her body strengthened from work that never seemed to end. She learned to read weather signs, to predict snow by the color of the sky, to understand when the cold was dangerous versus merely uncomfortable. Silas taught with the same economy he brought to everything, words spare, but precise demonstrations, clear and repeatable. He never praised her progress, but he stopped treating her like she might shatter at any moment. The girls adapted in their own ways. Abigail took over household management with quiet competence, stretching limited supplies, keeping the house as warm as failing infrastructure allowed. Louisa attached herself to the practical aspects of ranch life, asking questions about everything, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Lottie stayed close to Ruth, the 2 youngest sisters, forming a unit that depended on each other for comfort and courage. Ruth's cough faded slowly, her strength returning day by day, though she remained fragile in ways that made Clara's heart clench with worry. Josie remained difficult, her anger a constant presence, but she worked. She worked harder than anyone except Clara, throwing herself into physical labor like she was punishing herself for something she couldn't name. And then Jedediah Crane returned. Clara was in the barn attempting repairs Silas had shown her when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She set down her tools and walked outside. her stomach tightening as she recognized the rider. Crane dismounted with theatrical precision, his expensive clothes incongruous against the rough landscape. "Mrs. Whitmore, I see you're still here." "Mr. Crane, I don't recall inviting you." "I don't require invitations." He smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "I've come to discuss business, the matter of your uncle's debt." "I don't have $800. "I'm aware, which is why I'm prepared to offer you an alternative arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Crane stepped closer, his boots crunching on packed snow. "Your uncle's water rights are worth more than the land itself. The creek that runs through this property feeds 3 other ranches downstream. If I controlled that water, I could control everything in this valley. And you want me to sell you the water rights?" "I want to buy your entire property, Mrs. Whitmore. I'll forgive the $800 debt and give you another $200 on top. That's $1,000 total, enough to take your daughters somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere you won't have to worry about freezing to death or starving." It was tempting. Clara felt the pull of it, the seductive promise of escape from this endless struggle. "And if I refuse?" Crane's smile sharpened. "Then I'm afraid I'll have to pursue the debt through legal channels. The courts in this territory are quite strict about property claims. If you can't pay what's owed, the judge will order the land sold at auction to cover the debt. Either way, this property ends up in my hands. The only question is whether you walk away with something or nothing." "How do I know my uncle actually owed you that money?" "I have documents, signed and witnessed." "I'd like to see them." "In time. First, I'd like your answer." Clara felt anger building beneath her fear, hot and clarifying. "My answer is no." "Mrs. Whitmore." "My answer is no. I won't sell to a man who preys on widows and orphans. I won't hand over my children's future to someone who waited until my uncle was too weak to fight back before claiming debts that may or may not be real." Crane's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. You have until the end of winter to change your mind. After that, I file in court." He remounted his horse, looking down at her with contempt. "Think carefully, Mrs. Whitmore. This valley has broken stronger people than you." He rode away, leaving Clara standing in the snow, her heart pounding her hands, shaking with rage and fear. She was still standing there when Silas appeared, his horse emerging from the tree line where he'd obviously been watching. "How much did you hear?" Clara asked. "Enough. Is he right? Can he take this land if I can't pay?" Silas dismounted, his expression grim. "He can try. Courts here aren't always fair, and Crane's got money to buy whatever verdict he wants, but he's got to prove that debt first. Your uncle wasn't a fool. If he owed that much money, there'd be records beyond whatever Crane claims to have. Where would those records be? Bank in town, maybe. Your uncle's papers, if he kept any." Clara thought of the trunk in her uncle's bedroom filled with documents she hadn't had time to examine. There might be something in the house. Then we look tonight, and we find out exactly what Crane thinks he's owed and whether there's any truth to it. They searched for hours, Clara and Silas working through her uncle's papers while the girls slept. Receipts, letters, legal documents that made little sense to Clara's untrained eye. But Silas understood. "Here." He pulled a yellowed paper from the stack. "This is a promissory note from Crane to your uncle, not the other way around." "What does that mean?" "Means your uncle loaned Crane money not borrowed from him. $300 7 years ago. And here, another paper, is a record of partial repayment. Crane paid back $100, still owes $200. Clara stared at the documents, understanding dawning. He's lying. Crane is lying about my uncle's debt because he wants this land. Appears so. Question is whether we can prove it in court. These papers prove it. These papers help. But Crane's got lawyers, witnesses. He's probably paid to say whatever he needs them to say. We need more than old receipts to beat him. Clara felt hope and despair wrestling in her chest. What do we do? Silas was quiet for a long moment. "We find allies," he said finally. "People in this valley who know what Crane is, who've been hurt by him, who might be willing to stand up if they think there's a chance of winning. Would they do that? Stand up to someone with that much power? Some might, if they believe you're worth fighting for." Silas met her eyes. "That's the question, Mrs. Whitmore. Can you make them believe?" Clara thought of her daughters sleeping in the next room, of everything she'd survived to bring them here, of the future she was fighting to build. "I can try," she said. "That's all I can do. Try." Silas nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression that Clara couldn't quite name. "Then we start tomorrow. You've got a valley to convince, and a winter to survive." He stood gathering his coat. "Get some rest. Morning comes early." He left, and Clara sat alone in the lamplight, surrounded by papers that might save her family or mean nothing at all. Outside, the wind howled through the darkness, and the cold pressed against every window. But inside, for the first time since arriving in Colorado, Clara Whitmore felt something stronger than fear. She felt ready to fight. The next morning, Clara rode into Westcliff with documents tucked inside her coat and fear churning in her stomach. Silas had offered to come, but she'd refused. This was her fight, her family, her future to save or lose. The town looked different in daylight than it had when she'd first arrived, desperate and half-frozen on that stagecoach. Smaller somehow. More fragile. A collection of buildings clinging to existence in a valley that didn't care whether they survived. She tied Sadie outside the general store and walked inside her boots, tracking snow across the wooden floor. The woman behind the counter looked up with eyes that had seen too much hardship to be surprised by anything. "Help you?" "I'm looking for Minerva Blackwood. I was told she owns a ranch south of here." "Minnie? What do you want with her?" "I want to talk. About Jedediah Crane." The woman's expression shifted. Something that might have been fear, might have been hope, flickered across her weathered face. "You're the Whitmore widow, Ezra's niece." "I am." "Heard Crane's been sniffing around your property. Heard he's claiming your uncle owed him money." "He's lying. I have proof." The woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Minnie Blackwood lives 3 miles south past the old mill. You'll know her place by the red barn. But be careful what you say in town. Crane's got ears everywhere." "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Most folks in this valley are too scared to stand up to that man. Minnie's different, but different don't always mean willing." Clara left the store and rode south, following directions that led her through country she was only beginning to recognize. The red barn appeared exactly where the shopkeeper had promised, beside a house that looked sturdy and well-maintained despite the harsh conditions. A woman emerged before Clara could dismount, a rifle cradled casually in her arms. "That's far enough. State your business." "My name is Clara Whitmore. I inherited the ranch east of here from my uncle Ezra." "I know who you are. Whole Valley knows. Question is why you're on my property." "Because Jedediah Crane is trying to steal my land, and I was told you might understand what that feels like." Minerva Blackwood lowered the rifle slightly. She was perhaps 60, her face lined by sun and wind and years of hard living. Her eyes sharp with intelligence that assessed Clara from boots to bonnet. "Get down off that horse. We'll talk inside." The house was warm and clean, filled with the accumulated possessions of a life lived fully. Minerva poured coffee without asking, and settled across the table from Clara with the directness of someone who didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Crane tried to take my place 6 years ago. After my husband died, and everyone assumed a woman alone couldn't hold on to 2,000 acres. What happened? I fought him, dirty and public, and with everything I had. Cost me most of my savings and all of my reputation in certain circles." Minerva's smile was sharp. "But I'm still here, and he's still angry about it. That tells you something about what's possible." "How did you win?" I found proof he'd cheated my husband in a business deal years before. Brought it to court, made such a stink that the judge couldn't ignore it without looking bought. Crane backed off rather than face exposure. I have proof too. Clara pulled the documents from her coat. My uncle loaned Crane money, not the other way around. Crane still owes the estate $200. Minerva examined the papers with careful attention, her expression growing sharper with each page. This is good. This is real good. But Crane's got lawyers who can twist anything, witnesses who'll say whatever he pays them to say. You need more than paper to beat him in court. What do I need? People, voices, others who've been cheated, threatened, pushed around. Crane's been working this valley for 20 years. He's made enemies. Question is whether those enemies are brave enough to stand up when it counts. Will you help me find them? Minerva set down the papers and looked at Clara with eyes that had measured countless people and found most of them wanting. Why should I? I've got my own place to run, my own problems to manage. What's it to me if some city widow loses a ranch she didn't even know she had? Clara felt the words like a test, a challenge she had to meet. Because if Crane wins against me, he'll be stronger, more confident, more dangerous to everyone else he's been circling. You said yourself he's been working this valley for 20 years. How many more years before he owns everything? How many more widows, more orphans, more decent people who can't fight back? Pretty speech. It's not a speech. It's the truth. Clara leaned forward. I have 5 daughters, Mrs. Blackwood. 5 girls who have already survived more than any child should have to. Their father drank himself to death after spending every penny we had. I brought them here because there was nowhere else to go, nothing else to hope for. And I will fight with everything I have to give them something better than what they came from. Minerva was quiet for a long time, her coffee growing cold between her hands. Your uncle said something similar once, when he first came out here full of dreams about what he was going to build. Most men like that break within a year. Ezra didn't break. He bent some, especially after losing his boys, but he never broke completely. Did you know him well? Well enough. He was a good neighbor, honest dealer, helped me through that fight with Crane, even when it cost him. Minerva's expression softened slightly. I owed him for that. Never got the chance to pay it back before he passed. Then help his niece, help me. It won't be easy. Crane's had years to build his power. He's got the bank, the store, half the mortgages in this valley. People are scared of him because being scared keeps them alive. Are you scared of him? Minerva laughed, sharp and genuine. Terrified. Have been for years, but I learned something fighting him the first time. Fear and surrender aren't the same thing. You can be scared out of your mind and still keep fighting. She stood, moved to a cabinet, returned with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. All right, Clara Whitmore, I'll help you. But you need to understand what you're getting into. This isn't going to be a polite disagreement settled in a courtroom. Crane fights dirty. He'll come after your reputation, your children, anything he thinks will break you. Let him try. Minerva poured whiskey, handed Clara a glass. To fighting dirty right back. They drank, and Clara felt the burn of alcohol and hope spreading through her chest. The next 2 weeks became a campaign. Clara and Minerva rode together through the valley, visiting ranchers and farmers and townspeople, asking questions, listening to stories, building a picture of Jedediah Crane's predation that stretched back decades. The pattern was always the same. Crane identified vulnerable properties often owned by widows or aging ranchers without heirs. He manufactured debts or exploited existing ones, applied pressure through legal threats and social isolation, and eventually acquired land for far less than its value. Some people refused to talk, fear sealing their lips against even sympathetic questions. But others spoke haltingly at first, then with growing conviction as they realized they weren't alone. Tom Henley, whose father had lost 300 acres to Crane's schemes 10 years ago. Sarah Morrison, widow of a rancher who died under suspicious circumstances after refusing to sell. James and Mary Coolidge, elderly farmers hanging on to their property by fingernails, waiting for Crane to make his move. Each story added weight to Clara's understanding of what she was facing. Each voice added strength to the alliance she was building. Silas watched from a distance, helping with the ranch work, while Clara organized her resistance, teaching the older girls skills they'd need to keep the operation running during the fight ahead. One evening, returning late from a meeting with the Coolidges, Clara found him waiting on her porch despite the bitter cold. "You're making progress," he said. "Slow progress, but progress." Crane knows. Word is he's been asking questions about who you've been visiting, what you've been saying. Let him ask. Silas studied her in the lamplight, his gray eyes thoughtful. "You're different than when you arrived. Stronger, more sure of yourself." "I don't feel sure. I feel terrified every morning when I wake up and remember what we're trying to do." That's what strength looks like from the inside. Fear you act through instead of fear that stops you. Clara moved to stand beside him, looking out over land she was only beginning to know but already loved. "Silas, why are you really helping me? Not the debt to my uncle, not neighborly obligation, the real reason." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I had a family once. Wife named Catherine, son named Thomas. They died in a fever that swept through the valley 12 years ago now. I couldn't save them. Couldn't do anything but watch them slip away. I'm sorry. After that, I closed myself off. Stopped letting anyone close, stopped caring about anything except keeping my operation running. Told myself it was strength, but it was just hiding." He turned to face her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "Then you showed up. City woman with 5 daughters and no idea what she was facing. Should have been a disaster. Should have failed within the first week. Instead, you kept fighting. Kept getting up every time something knocked you down. Kept putting your children first even when it cost you everything. That's just motherhood. No, that's courage. The kind I used to have before I let grief turn me into a coward. You're not a coward." "I was. For years I was. Watching you fight for your family reminded me what living actually looks like." He reached out, touched her hand briefly. "That's why I'm helping. Because you woke up something in me I thought was dead." Clara felt warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the lamp and everything to do with the man standing beside her. "Silas, don't say anything, not yet. You've got a fight to win first, and whatever this is between us, it needs to wait until you're safe." He stepped back, creating distance that felt necessary and unwelcome at the same time. "Win your fight, Clara. Secure your future. Then we'll see what comes after." He left, walking into darkness toward his own ranch, leaving Clara with a heart full of feelings she didn't have time to examine, and a battle she couldn't afford to lose. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Clara was in town purchasing supplies when Crane appeared, flanked by 2 men who looked like they'd been hired more for muscle than any honest work. "Mrs. Whitmore, I hear you've been busy." "Mr. Crane, I have nothing to say to you." "That's unfortunate because I have quite a bit to say to you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You've been spreading lies about me throughout this valley, stirring up trouble, turning decent people against a businessman who's done nothing but support this community." "I've been telling the truth. There's a difference." "The truth is a flexible thing, Mrs. Whitmore. It bends depending on who's telling it and who's listening." Crane's smile was cold. "I could make your life very difficult. Your daughter's lives very difficult. A word in the right ear and that general store stops selling to you. The bank refuses any line of credit. The doctor finds himself too busy to treat sick children. Is that a threat? It's a reality. I built this town. I decide who thrives here and who fails." Clara felt fear grip her heart, the old terror of facing power without protection. But beneath the fear, anger was building, hot and righteous, and fed by every story she'd heard over the past weeks. "You didn't build anything, Mr. Crane. You stole it. From widows like Sarah Morrison, from families like the Henleys, from my uncle who trusted you when he shouldn't have." "Careful, Mrs. Whitmore." I have documents proving you owe my uncle's estate money, not the other way around. I have witnesses willing to testify about your methods. And I have allies who are tired of watching you prey on decent people." Crane's expression flickered surprise, breaking through his composed cruelty. "You're bluffing. Try me." They stood facing each other in the middle of the street, the town watching from doorways and windows, holding its breath. "You're making an enemy you can't afford," Crane said quietly. "You made an enemy of me the moment you threatened my family. I'm just finally fighting back." Crane stared at her for a long moment, calculation working behind his eyes. Then he laughed, a sound utterly without humor. "Enjoy your moment, Mrs. Whitmore. It won't last." He walked away, his hired men trailing behind, leaving Clara standing alone with her heart pounding and her hands shaking. But she didn't fall, didn't run, didn't back down. She'd challenged Jedediah Crane in public in front of witnesses, and he'd been the one to walk away. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was something. That night, Clara gathered her daughters around the fire and told them what was coming. Not every detail, but enough for them to understand. "There's a man who wants to take our land. I'm fighting him, and I'm going to win, but it might get harder before it gets better." "What kind of harder?" Josie demanded. "People in town might not be friendly. Some might refuse to help us. We need to be prepared to rely on ourselves and the allies we've made." "What allies?" "Mrs. Blackwood for one, and others who've agreed to stand with us when the time comes." "What about Mr. McAllister?" Louisa asked. Clara hesitated. "He's helping too, in his own way." "He's more than helping," Abigail said quietly. "He cares about you, Mama. Anyone can see it." "That's not important right now." "Isn't it?" Josie's voice had lost some of its anger, replaced by something almost like hope. "Maybe it's exactly what's important. Maybe having someone who cares about you really cares is the whole point." Clara looked at her difficult, wounded, perceptive daughter and felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "I've been watching, learning, seeing how you fight even when you're scared." Josie's jaw trembled. "I want to be like that, Mama. I want to be strong like you." "You already are, baby. You already are." The girls moved closer, forming a circle of warmth and solidarity that had nothing to do with the fire and everything to do with family. "Whatever comes," Clara said, "we face it together. That's what Whitmore women do." Together. They echoed their voices, blending into a single promise. Outside, the winter wind howled against the walls, and somewhere in the darkness, Jedediah Crane was planning his next move. But inside, surrounded by daughters who believed in her, and strengthened by allies who'd chosen to stand with her, Clara felt ready for whatever came next. The fight wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time since that terrible day on the stage, Coach Clara Whitmore knew she wasn't facing it alone. Crane's retaliation came 3 days later. Clara arrived at the general store to find the door locked against her, the shopkeeper's wife shaking her head through the window with fear in her eyes. "I'm sorry," the woman mouthed. "I can't." Clara stood on the wooden sidewalk, her list of needed supplies crumpling in her fist, and understood exactly what Crane had meant about making her life difficult. The bank was next. The manager, a nervous man named Pritchard, who sweated even in the cold, refused to meet her eyes. "I'm afraid we can't extend credit to your account, Mrs. Whitmore." "I'm not asking for credit. I'm asking to access my uncle's accounts. Money he deposited before he died. Those accounts have been frozen pending resolution of outstanding debts. What debts? I have proof those debts don't exist. Take it up with Mr. Crane's lawyers. Until then, my hands are tied." Clara walked out of the bank with empty hands and a heart full of fury. Crane was choking her out, cutting off every resource she needed to survive the winter and fight back against his claims. She found Silas at her ranch when she returned, mending a fence that had collapsed under the weight of overnight snow. He took one look at her face and set down his tools. What happened? Cranes blocked me from the store and the bank. I can't buy supplies. I can't access my uncle's money. How much do you have left? $3. Maybe 2 weeks of food if we're careful. Clara's voice cracked. He's going to starve us out. No, he's not. Silas's voice was steady, certain. I've got supplies, more than enough to share. I can't keep taking from you. You've already given too much. This isn't charity, Clara. This is neighbors helping neighbors. That's how this valley has always survived, by people standing together when someone tries to tear them down. But, no buts. You think I'm going to watch your daughters go hungry because some greedy man wants what isn't his? Silas stepped closer, his gray eyes fierce. You think I'm going to let him win by doing nothing? Clara felt tears threatening the exhaustion and fear of the past months finally overwhelming her careful control. I'm so tired, Silas. Tired of fighting. Tired of being scared. Tired of wondering if I made a terrible mistake bringing my girls here. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. The right choice, even if it doesn't feel that way right now. How do you know? Because I've watched you for 2 months now. Watched you learn things that take most people years. Watched you stand up to a man who's broken stronger people than you. Watched you hold your family together through everything this valley has thrown at you. He reached out, cupped her face in his calloused hands. You're not going to fail, Clara. I won't let you. She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his certainty. What do we do now? We keep fighting. Crane wants to isolate you, so we make sure everyone knows what he's doing. He wants to starve you out, so we make sure you have everything you need. He wants you to break, so we show him what breaking looks like. And the court case. The documents, we present them, in front of witnesses in public where he can't bury the truth with lawyers and bribes. Silas released her face, stepped back. Minerva's already talking to Judge Harrison. He's one of the few honest men in the territory. If we can get our evidence in front of him, Crane's lies fall apart. Will he listen? He'll listen. Question is, whether Crane will let us get that far. The answer came 2 nights later when Clara woke to the smell of smoke. She was out of bed and running before full consciousness returned her body, responding to danger with instincts she hadn't known she possessed. The barn was on fire. Flames licked up the eastern wall, spreading fast in the dry winter air, consuming wood that had stood for 20 years in a matter of minutes. Girls, wake up, get outside. Abigail appeared first, already pulling on boots, her face white with fear. Mama, what? Get your sisters out, now, away from the buildings. Clara ran toward the barn, toward the sound of terrified animals, toward fire that grew hotter with every step. The horses. Her uncle's horses, the ones Silas had been teaching her to manage, the ones she'd need come spring. She threw open the barn door, and heat hit her like a physical blow. Smoke filled her lungs, made her eyes stream, turned the familiar space into a hellscape of orange light and black shadow. Easy, easy now. The horses were panicking, throwing themselves against stall doors, their screams cutting through the roar of the flames. Clara grabbed the first halter she could reach, dragged a fighting mare toward the door, pushed her out into the cold night air. Back inside. Second horse. This one fought harder, rearing against her grip, nearly pulling her off her feet. Move, damn you! She got him out. Turned to go back for the third. Silas appeared from the darkness, his face grim, his movements swift and sure. I've got the last one. Get clear. The barn is gone. Nothing we can do. Get clear. He disappeared into the smoke. Clara waited, lungs burning, eyes streaming, until he emerged, leading the final horse, both of them coughing from the toxic air. The barn collapsed moments later, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. Clara stood watching it burn, her daughters huddled behind her, their faces lit by flames that consumed weeks of work and years of her uncle's labor. Crane did this, she said quietly. Can't prove it. I know he did. Knowing and proving are different things. Silas put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against the cold. He's escalating. Fire tonight. What comes next? I don't know. You need to be ready for anything. Clara looked at her daughters, at their frightened faces and trembling bodies, and felt something harden inside her. I'm ready. I'm ready to end this. The next morning, Clara rode to Minerva's ranch with evidence of the fire still staining her clothes and smoke still clinging to her hair. He burned my barn. Minerva's expression darkened. You sure it was him? Who else? I challenged him in public. He threatened me. 3 days later, my barn goes up in flames. Same thing happened to the Morrisons right before Sarah's husband died. Barn fire, then the house, then William Morrison was found at the bottom of a ravine. Clara felt ice spread through her veins. You think Crane killed him? Can't prove it. Nobody could prove anything. That's how Crane works. Always enough doubt. Always enough distance between him and whatever happens to his enemies. Then how do we beat him? Minerva poured coffee, her movements deliberate. We go public. Not just with the documents, but with everything. Every story, every victim, every crime he's committed over 20 years. We make it impossible for anyone to look away, impossible for any judge to pretend they don't see the pattern. How? There's a meeting tomorrow night. Town council such as it is. Normally Crane controls it, but Judge Harrison's in town for the quarterly session. If we can get enough people to speak, enough voices telling the truth, Harrison will have to act. Will people speak after what Crane's done to anyone who stands against him? Some will. The Henleys have agreed. So have the Coolidges. Others are still deciding. And if Crane tries to stop it? Minerva smiled, sharp and dangerous. That's why we don't give him warning. We show up, we speak, we force the issue before he can mobilize his lawyers and his hired men. Clara thought of her daughters, of the burned barn, of everything she'd risked coming to this valley. I'm in, whatever it takes. Good. Because there's no going back after tomorrow. Either we break Crane's power, or he breaks us. Clara returned home to find Silas organizing what had been salvaged from the barn fire. 3 horses, some tack, a handful of tools. Everything else was ash. We can rebuild, he said when he saw her expression. Come spring, we'll put up a new barn. Better than the old one. If there is a spring. If Crane doesn't destroy everything else first. He won't. Silas set down the bridle he was cleaning. Tell me what Minerva said. Clara explained the plan, watching his face for reaction. It's risky, he said when she finished. Crane won't take it lying down. I know. You could get hurt. Your daughters could get hurt. They're already hurt. Every day we spend under Crane's shadow is another day they learn that bullies always win. That power is more important than justice. I won't teach them that. Silas studied her for a long moment. Then I'll be there, beside you, whatever happens. You could make yourself a target. I'm already a target. The moment I started helping you, I became Crane's enemy. He stepped closer, took her hands in his. I told you once that watching you fight woke something in me I thought was dead. That's true, but it's more than that now. Silas. Let me say this. Whatever happens tomorrow, you need to know. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. I love you, Clara Whitmore. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you put your children first, even when it costs you everything. I love who you've become since arriving in this valley and who you're still becoming. I love you too. The words came easily, as natural as breathing. I've loved you since that night in the storm, when you came to check on us without being asked. Maybe before that. Maybe from the moment you opened your door and let 5 freezing strangers into your home. Then we fight together, tomorrow and every day after. Together. He kissed her, then gentle and fierce at the same time, and Clara felt the last of her doubts dissolve in the warmth of his embrace. The town meeting was held in the church, the only building large enough to hold the crowd that gathered. Clara had expected a dozen people. She found nearly 50 filling pews and standing along walls, their faces a mixture of hope and fear. Judge Harrison sat at the front, a man in his 60s, with a reputation for honesty that had survived decades of territorial politics. Beside him sat Jedediah Crane, his expression thunderous, clearly caught off guard by the size of the gathering. Minerva stood first. "Your Honor, we've come to present evidence of crimes committed against the people of this valley. Crimes of fraud, intimidation, and theft. Crimes that have gone unpunished for too long." Crane surged to his feet. "This is outrageous. This woman has no authority to—" "Sit down, Mr. Crane." Judge Harrison's voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. "Everyone will have their chance to speak." Crane sat, but his eyes blazed with fury. One by one, the witnesses came forward. Tom Henley described his father's destruction. Sarah Morrison spoke of her husband's death and the suspicious circumstances surrounding it. The Coolidges presented documents showing how Crane had manipulated their mortgage. And then it was Clara's turn. She stood before the judge, before Crane, before a town that had watched her struggle for months, and laid out every piece of evidence she possessed. Jedediah Crane claims my uncle owed him $800. This document proves the opposite. My uncle loaned Mr. Crane $300 7 years ago. This receipt shows partial repayment of $100. Mr. Crane still owes my uncle's estate $200. "Those documents are forgeries," Crane snarled. "Your Honor, the documents bear my uncle's signature, witnessed by Thomas Morrison and James Coolidge, both present in this room and willing to verify their authenticity." The Coolidges nodded, their faces grim. Crane's expression shifted, calculation replacing fury. "This is a conspiracy. These people have been turned against me by Mrs. Whitmore's lies and the influence of Mrs. Blackwood, who has harbored a grudge since I rightfully claimed property she couldn't manage." "Rightfully?" Minerva's voice cut through the murmur. "You stole my land through forged documents and bribed witnesses. The only reason I got it back was because I found proof you couldn't bury." "Proof? What proof?" "The same kind of proof we have now. The kind that shows exactly who you are and what you've done." Judge Harrison raised his hand for silence. "Mr. Crane, you've been accused of serious crimes by multiple witnesses with documentary evidence. How do you respond?" Crane stood, straightening his coat, recovering his composure with visible effort. "I am a businessman, Your Honor. I have made enemies, as all successful men do. These accusations are the desperate attacks of people who owe me money and wish to escape their obligations. The documents suggest otherwise. Documents can be forged. Then you won't object to a formal investigation." Judge Harrison's voice was level. "I'm ordering all relevant financial records seized and examined. If these accusations are false, the investigation will prove it. If they're true—" "You can't do this." "I can, and I am." The judge stood. "Jedediah Crane, you are ordered to appear before the territorial court in 3 weeks to answer these charges. Until then, all claims you hold against properties in this valley are suspended pending investigation." The room erupted. Clara felt Silas's hand find hers, felt Minerva's arm around her shoulders, felt the weight of the past months finally beginning to lift. Crane pushed through the crowd toward her, his face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? This isn't over. I will destroy you. I will destroy everyone who stood against me tonight." Clara met his eyes without flinching. "No, Mr. Crane, you won't, because we're not afraid of you anymore." She turned her back on him and walked out of the church, surrounded by people who had finally found the courage to stand together. The night air was cold, but clean, free of smoke and fear. Silas pulled her close, his breath warm against her hair. "You did it. We did it. All of us. What happens now? Now we wait for the investigation, and we rebuild, and we start living the life we came here to build. Together." Clara looked up at the man who had saved her family, taught her to survive, loved her through everything. Together. Always. Behind them, the church emptied, as the people of the valley scattered toward homes that might finally be safe from Jedediah Crane's shadow. The fight wasn't completely over. There would be the trial, the investigation, the slow process of justice working through territorial courts. But the power had shifted. The silence had broken. And Clara Whitmore, who had arrived in Colorado with nothing but 5 daughters and desperate hope, had proven that sometimes the impossible was merely difficult. The 3 weeks before the trial passed in a blur of preparation and cautious hope. Clara worked alongside Silas every day, clearing debris from the burned barn, planning the structure that would replace it come spring. The cattle she'd found in the canyons had survived the winter, all 10 of them, plus 3 calves born in the cold months. Not a fortune, but a foundation. Her daughters had changed in ways that made Clara's heart swell with pride. Abigail managed the household with quiet authority, stretching every resource, making meals from almost nothing. Josie had stopped fighting and started working. Her anger transformed into determination that matched her mother's. Louisa knew the ranch almost as well as Clara did, now her practical mind cataloging every detail of land and livestock. Lottie had lost her fearfulness, replaced by a steady courage that came from surviving the worst and finding herself still standing. And Ruth, precious Ruth, who had nearly died that first terrible night, ran through the snow with cheeks pink from health instead of fever. They had made it. Against every odd, every prediction, every voice that said a city widow with 5 daughters couldn't survive a Colorado winter. "Mama." Josie's voice pulled Clara from her thoughts. "There's a rider coming." Clara shaded her eyes against the winter sun and felt her stomach tighten. But the rider wasn't one of Crane's men. It was the territorial marshal, his badge glinting in the cold light. "Mrs. Whitmore." "I am." "Marshal Thomas Crawford. Judge Harrison sent me." He dismounted, his expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Crane attempted to flee the territory last night. He was apprehended at the border with a significant amount of cash and forged documents." Clara felt the words wash over her like warm water. "What does that mean?" "It means he won't be standing trial for fraud anymore. He'll be standing trial for attempted flight obstruction of justice, and based on what we found in his possession, likely murder." Murder. Documents suggesting he arranged the death of William Morrison 6 years ago, among others. The marshal's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing disgust beneath. "You and the other witnesses exposed a pattern of crimes going back 2 decades, Mrs. Whitmore. The territorial governor himself is taking interest." Clara couldn't speak, couldn't process the magnitude of what she was hearing. "What happens now?" Silas asked from beside her. "Now justice happens. Crane will face trial in Denver where his influence can't reach. His assets will be seized, his debts to the community will be addressed, and the people he victimized will finally see some measure of restitution." The marshal remounted, touched his hat. "You did something important here, Mrs. Whitmore. Took courage most people don't have. This valley won't forget that." He rode away, leaving Clara standing in snow that suddenly seemed less cold, less threatening, less like an enemy trying to destroy her. Silas's arms came around her from behind. "It's over," he said quietly. "Really over." "I can't believe it." "Believe it. You won." Clara turned in his embrace, looked up at the man who had saved her family in so many ways. "We won. All of us together." That night, Clara gathered her daughters around the fire and told them what the marshal had said. She watched their faces as understanding dawned, as the weight of fear they'd carried for months finally began to lift. "So we're safe?" Lottie asked. "Nobody's going to take our home." "Nobody's going to take our home. This land is ours, free and clear. Forever. Forever." Ruth climbed into Clara's lap, her small body warm and solid and alive. "I like it here, Mama. I like the snow and the horses and Mr. Silas." "I like it here too, baby." "Are we going to stay?" "We're going to stay." Josie was quiet, her expression thoughtful in a way that no longer seemed angry. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Anything." When you first came here when everything was terrible and it looked like we were going to fail, did you really believe we could make it? Or were you just pretending for us? Clara considered the question carefully. Both. I believed because I had to believe, because giving up meant letting your father's destruction follow us forever. But I also pretended some days when believing felt impossible. I pretended until pretending became real. Is that what courage is? Pretending until it's real. I think courage is being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. The pretending just helps you get through the scared parts. Abigail smiled, the expression making her look younger than she had in months. You're very brave, Mama. So are you. All of you. You survived things no children should have to face, and you came out stronger. We had a good teacher, Louisa said quietly. Clara felt tears threatening and didn't try to stop them. I love you, all of you, more than I can ever say. We love you too, Mama. They sat together until the fire burned low, a family that had been shattered and rebuilt, broken and healed, tested and proven. Spring came slowly to the wet mountain valley, snow retreating inch by inch to reveal grass that would feed cattle and hope that would feed souls. The new barn rose where the old one had burned, built by hands from across the valley. Ranchers who had stood with Clara against Crane came to help, repaying courage with labor, solidarity with sweat. Minerva Blackwood worked alongside the men, her sharp tongue directing efforts with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. Clara learned to swing a hammer to measure boards, to understand the geometry of construction, the way she'd learned to understand cattle and weather and survival. Her muscles had grown strong over the winter months. Her hands calloused, her body adapted to work that would have killed her 6 months ago. Silas worked beside her every day, their partnership deepening through shared effort and quiet conversations. He taught her things she hadn't known to ask about, ranching wisdom accumulated over decades, and she taught him things he'd forgotten: the value of hope, the power of family, the importance of opening your heart, even when it meant risking pain. You're different, she told him one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sun set. Different how? Lighter, like something that was pressing down on you has lifted. Silas was quiet for a moment. I spent 12 years grieving, not moving forward, not really living, just existing in the shadow of what I'd lost. You showed me that grief doesn't have to be a prison. I didn't do anything special. You did everything special. You arrived in this valley broken and terrified and determined to build something anyway. You showed me that starting over is possible at any age, in any circumstance. I had help. Everyone needs help. The strength is in accepting it. Clara leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. I want to build a life with you, Silas, a real life. Not just neighbors helping each other survive, but partners building something together. Is that a proposal, Mrs. Whitmore? It might be, if you're brave enough to accept. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I've faced blizzards, droughts, cattle stampedes, and Jedediah Crane. I reckon I'm brave enough to take on a widow with 5 daughters. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Clara felt joy spreading through her like spring warmth after a long winter. The girls will be happy. The girls already know. Abigail cornered me last week and asked what my intentions were. Very formal, very protective. What did you tell her? Told her my intentions were honorable, and I'd treat her mother with the respect she deserved. Told her I loved you and I loved them, and I wanted to spend whatever years I have left building something good with all of you. What did she say? She said I'd better not disappoint her or she'd make me regret it. Silas smiled. I believed her. The wedding happened in early May when the valley was green and the mountains still wore caps of white. Reverend Whitfield performed the ceremony in the small church where Clara had confronted Crane months before. The pews were filled with people who had become friends, neighbors, allies in a fight that had changed everyone involved. Minerva stood as Clara's witness, her weathered face soft with emotion she rarely showed. You did good, Clara Whitmore. Better than good. Couldn't have done it without you. Could have. Would have been harder, but you would have found a way. That's what survivors do. Clara's daughters stood in a row wearing dresses Abigail had sewn from fabric purchased with money earned from their first cattle sale. 5 girls who had started this journey frightened and uncertain now, standing tall with the confidence of those who had faced the worst and prevailed. Ruth, youngest and most precious, carried flowers picked from meadows that belonged to them. "Mama looks pretty," she whispered loudly to Lottie. "Mama looks happy," Lottie whispered back. Clara heard them both and felt her heart overflow. Silas waited at the front of the church dressed in clothes that were new but not fancy, his gray eyes bright with emotions he'd spent years hiding from the world. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly as she reached him. "Never been more sure of anything. It won't always be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is." Reverend Whitfield cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Clara Whitmore and Silas McAllister in holy matrimony." The words flowed over Clara like a benediction, each promise a building block in the foundation of her new life. "Do you, Silas Jacob McAllister, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health for richer or poorer? Until death do you part?" "I do." "And do you, Clara Jane Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" Clara looked at Silas, at the man who had opened his door to strangers on the worst night of her life, who had taught her to survive, and then taught her to thrive, who had loved her without asking for anything in return. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The kiss was tender and certain, sealing promises made in words with the language of the heart. The church erupted in applause, the sounds of a community celebrating not just a wedding, but a victory over darkness and fear. Clara's daughters surrounded them, 5 girls who had gained a father they could trust, a protector who would never raise a hand in anger. "We're a family now," Ruth said solemnly. "A real family." "We've always been a real family," Clara told her. "Now we're just bigger." The reception lasted until sunset, food and laughter, and the particular joy of people who had survived hard things together. Clara danced with Silas, with her daughters, with neighbors who had become friends. When the celebration finally wound down, she stood on the porch of her house, their house now, and looked out over land that stretched toward mountains turning pink in the fading light. "What are you thinking?" Silas asked, coming to stand beside her. "I'm thinking about a woman who stepped off a stagecoach 7 months ago with $5 and 5 daughters and no idea how she was going to survive. What happened to her? She discovered she was stronger than she knew, braver than she believed, capable of things she never imagined. Sounds like quite a woman. She had help, a neighbor who could have minded his own business but chose to open his door instead." Silas pulled her close, his arms warm and solid around her. "Best decision I ever made." "Better than proposing?" "That was the second best. Opening my door was first. Everything else followed from that." Clara leaned into him, watching stars emerge in a sky that no longer seemed empty and threatening, but vast with possibility. "We're going to build something beautiful here," she said. "Something that lasts. Something our children and their children can be proud of. We already have." From inside the house came the sound of daughters laughing, the particular music of a family at peace. Clara had come to Colorado expecting to die. She'd found life instead richer and fuller than anything she'd known before. She'd found strength in herself and support in others. She'd found a man worth loving and a community worth fighting for. She'd found home. The inheritance she'd never wanted had become the foundation of everything she'd never dared to hope for. And standing there in the twilight, surrounded by land she had bled to keep and family she had fought to protect. Clara Whitmore McAllister knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey from Philadelphia had covered thousands of miles. The journey from frightened widow to confident rancher had covered much more. But both journeys had led her here to this moment, to this life, to this love. And it was worth every step. The valley spread before her green with spring promise, quiet with evening peace. Somewhere in the distance, cattle grazed on land that bore her name. Behind her, a house filled with daughters who had learned that strength wasn't about never falling, but about always getting up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new opportunities to build on what they'd started. Spring Roundup was coming, and with it, the chance to prove that everything they'd survived had prepared them for everything that lay ahead. But tonight was for gratitude, for wonder, for the simple miracle of having made it through. Clara closed her eyes and breathed deep, filling her lungs with air that smelled of pine and grass and home. "Ready to go in?" Silas asked. "In a minute. I want to remember this feeling." "What feeling?" "This one, right now. Standing here with you knowing our daughters are safe inside, knowing we've built something that matters. I want to remember it forever." "You won't need to remember. We're going to feel this way for a long time." Clara opened her eyes and smiled at the man she loved. Promise. Promise. They walked inside together, closing the door on the night and opening their hearts to the future. Behind them, the stars blazed bright over a valley that had tested everything Clara had and found her worthy. She had arrived with nothing but desperate hope and 5 daughters. She had built a legacy that would outlast her, a family that would carry her strength forward, a love that would anchor them all through whatever storms might come. Clara Whitmore McAllister had inherited a dying ranch in a frozen wilderness, and she had transformed it into something living and growing and beautiful. Not because circumstances favored her, not because luck smiled on her, not because the path was easy, because she refused to quit, because she fought for every inch, because she discovered that the strength to build a new life had been inside her all along, waiting for a challenge worthy of calling it forth. The West had tried to break her, and she had broken through instead. And that was a legacy worth leaving to daughters who would carry it forward, proof that courage and love and stubborn determination could overcome anything.